What if your dream honeymoon turned into a nightmare? This is the story of Alix Martin and the chilling secrets she uncovered at Philomel Cottage. A woman's dream wedding turns into a living nightmare. Alix Martin, glowing with the excitement of her recent marriage, arrives at a secluded cottage nestled deep in the countryside. The air smells fresh with hints of pine, and the gravel driveway crunches under their car's tires as James, her charming yet oddly reserved husband, parks with a grin. "This is it," James says, stepping out and surveying the idyllic landscape, "our perfect escape." Alix forces a smile, but a strange chill brushes down her spine. There's a stillness here that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels watchful, as if the trees themselves are harboring secrets. The cottage is quaint but imposing, its stone walls weathered by time. Ivy coils around the structure like a possessive hand. As they step inside, Alix notices the air inside is thick, carrying an odd metallic scent. "Needs a little airing out," James says casually, dropping their bags near the staircase. "I'll get us settled in." Alix wanders through the cozy yet oddly claustrophobic rooms. Her fingers trail along the rough walls, catching on a spider web that clings to her skin. She shudders, brushing it off. In the living room, a massive fireplace dominates the space, its iron grate dark with soot. Above it hangs an old Pentinga's serene landscape, but the longer Alix looks, the more unsettling it becomes. Is that a figure hidden among the trees? She blinks, and the figure is gone. That night, the unease gnaws at her. James is sound asleep beside her, but Alix lies wide awake, her ears straining against the oppressive silence. Suddenly, a faint thud echoes from above. Her heart races. She sits up, holding her breath. Was it just the house settling, or something else? Another thud, louder this time, and then whispering. No, not whispering. A voice, low and chilling, like someone murmuring secrets just out of reach. Gathering her courage, Alix grabs her phone for light and tiptoes toward the staircase leading to the attic. Each step creaks beneath her weight, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. At the top, the attic door looms, slightly ajar. Her pulse pounds in her ears. She pushes the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The beam of her phone cuts through the darkness, landing on nothing, just dust motes swirling in the stale air. Relief washes over her, but it's fleeting. As she turns to leave, she freezes. Cliffhanger ending. A faint glimmer catches her eye, something metallic glinting from the far corner. She steps closer, heart hammering, and sees a rusty chain hanging from the ceiling, swaying gently despite the still air. And then, from behind her, a voice barely louder than a breath. "Welcome home, Alix." The investigation begins. The honeymoon glow that had once surrounded Alix fades as days pass, replaced by an oppressive silence that hangs between her and James. The cottage, once a symbol of their new life together, begins to feel like a prison. Each morning, Alix awakes to find James already gone, his usual routine of being by her side, replaced by inexplicable absences. It starts small, James, muttering vague excuses when she asks where he's been. "Just needed to clear my head," he'd say, a tightness in his voice, his eyes never meeting hers. His charm, once warm and comforting, has shifted into something distant, something cold. At first, Alix brushes it off, telling herself it's just the stress of their new life. But the nagging unease grows with each passing hour, and soon, Alix finds herself watching James when he doesn't know it, searching for answers in his every movement. There's something else, too, a strange, unfamiliar odor in the house. It lingers in the corners, faint at first, but impossible to ignore as time goes on. A metallic smell that reminds her of copper, sharp and bitter, clinging to the walls like a secret that refuses to stay buried. She searches for its source, opening cupboards, checking the drains, but nothing explains it, and James, he doesn't seem to notice. Then, one afternoon, while going through their things, Alix finds a letter tucked into one of James's old books. It's written in elegant, cursive handwriting, the kind of script that seems almost too old-fashioned for today's world. The letter is from an old friend of James's, someone Alix has never heard of, but the words, they chill her to the bone. "I hope you're happy with her, James, but remember what we did. Remember who we left behind." The words echo in her mind, and Alix feels a knot tighten in her stomach. Who had James left behind, and what had he done that now, after all these years, was coming back to haunt him? The letter reeks of something unresolved, like a dark shadow from his past that refuses to stay hidden. Her mind races as she starts piecing things together. She recalls the strange mannerisms in James's behavior, the way his smile no longer reaches his eyes, the way he shifts uncomfortably when she brings up their future. What was he hiding, and why did it feel as though every room in the cottage was closing in on her? The sense of dread grows. Driven by a need to know the truth, Alix begins searching the house. The walls feel as though they're watching her, and every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet sends a jolt of panic through her. She opens drawers and cabinets, sifting through papers, photographs, anything that might reveal a clue. It's as if her own sense of normalcy is unraveling, thread by thread. In the attic, she finds something strange, an old, weathered trunk hidden beneath the floorboards. Her heart races as she pries it open, revealing the contents: old journals, faded photographs, and a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. As she flips through the papers, a cold shiver runs down her spine. The handwriting is unmistakable. It's James's, only it's not the same. These letters are darker, filled with emotion and remorse, speaking of a woman Alix doesn't recognize. Her hand trembles as she reads one of the letters aloud to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll never forget what we did. I'll never forgive myself." The words hit her like a slap, and she feels the walls of the house closing in. She stumbles backward, panic rising in her chest. What had he done? What was this woman to him? And why was he hiding all of this from her? The room begins to spin. Alix's vision blurs as the reality of her marriage begins to unravel before her eyes. Could everything she knew about James be a lie? Had she married a stranger? Desperation begins to consume her. The more she digs, the darker the secrets grow, and the more she fears the worst. But it's not enough. There's still something she's missing. Something deeper, hidden beneath layers of deception. Her breath comes in short gasps as she hears a noise: footsteps. James is home. With no time to think, Alix stashes the letters in the trunk, sealing it shut. She stands frozen, her heart thudding in her chest, as the door creaks open behind her. James steps into the room, his eyes catching hers for a moment, but he doesn't speak. Alix holds her breath. Something about his gaze is different. There's a darkness in it now, an unreadable expression that sends a chill to her bones. He doesn't say a word, but the silence between them speaks volumes. Alix forces a smile, though it feels foreign on her lips. "I was just looking around," she says, her voice trembling despite her best effort. James's lips curl into a tight smile, but there's nothing warm about it. "Looking for answers, Alix." The words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Alix's blood runs cold. Cliffhanger ending. The silence stretches between them, thick and suffocating, before James finally speaks, his voice low and deliberate. "You shouldn't have gone looking." Alix's pulse spikes. What had she uncovered? What had she done? And worse, what will James do now that she knows too much? The suspects, fearful. Alix's search for answers leads her down an increasingly dark path, filled with more questions than solutions. Each day, the walls of the cottage seem to close in tighter, and the once comforting presence of her husband, James, now feels like a haunting specter looming over her every move. She can no longer ignore the strange feeling that something is off, not just with James, but with everyone and everything around him. Her trust in him is slowly crumbling, piece by piece. She begins questioning every moment they've shared, every conversation, every smile, and every touch. The more she looks, the more his behavior stands out, those subtle but telling shifts in mood, his inexplicable absences, the look in his eyes when she asks certain questions. It all feels wrong, like a carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. James Martin, the husband. Alix can't shake the image of James from that night. In the attic, the coldness in his eyes, the way he'd spoken so cryptically about the things they'd left behind. His charm, once magnetic, now feels like a mask, hiding something darker. What is he hiding? At first, James's mood swings had seemed almost endearing, a quirk in his otherwise perfect persona. But now, each mood shift feels like a ticking time bomb. One moment, he's the man she married, warm, affectionate, loving. The next, he's distant, withdrawn, almost cold. His smiles no longer reach his eyes. It's as if he's become a stranger to her. Why is he so withdrawn? Why the secrecy? Alix begins to notice things she never had before, the way his voice cracks when he speaks of certain subjects, the way he tenses whenever she mentions the house's strange history, and the fear that flashes in his eyes when she asks about his past. He's hiding something, the secret buried so deep that he'll go to any length to protect it. But the more she presses, the more he shuts her out. Is he guilty of something terrible? Or is there a deeper, more twisted reason for his behavior? But Alix can't just focus on James. She knows there's more to this than just him. The past he's running from, could it involve the people around him? Could they be the key to unlocking the mystery? It's time to turn her suspicion elsewhere. The people around James. Alix's search expands to include those who have been in James's life before her. She starts asking questions, making subtle inquiries to anyone who might have known him before their marriage. The answers she uncovers leave her feeling more lost than ever. Sophia Donovan, a former colleague of James's, who had once been more than a professional acquaintance. She's the kind of woman who can make any room fall silent with a glance, confident, poised, but there's something unsettling about her. Alix's instincts flare whenever Sophia enters the conversation. She's too perfect, too controlled, and Alix can't shake the feeling that there's an unspoken connection between Sophia and James. Was there something more between them, a relationship that had ended badly? Or is it something more sinister, like a shared secret that could shatter everything? Sophia is always in the right place at the right time, and she seems to know just what to say to James to get under his skin. When Alix speaks to her, Sophia's responses are too rehearsed, as if she's reading from a script. Alix catches a flicker of something dark in Sophia's eyes when she mentions the cottage. Why does Sophia seem so interested in their new life together? Marcus Reed, a childhood friend of James, now a quiet figure in the town who runs a local bookstore. His aloof demeanor makes him difficult to read, but there's something unsettling about his attachment to James. Alix often catches Marcus gazing at James with an intensity that feels out of place, too familiar for someone who should be just a friend. Could Marcus know something James is trying to hide? He's always around when things go wrong, a silent observer, never saying much but always watching. One evening, after a tense conversation, Marcus casually mentions that James hasn't been the same since that thing happened. When Alix presses him on what he means, he quickly shuts down, leaving her with 1,000 unanswered questions. What thing? What happened in James's past that still haunts him? Eleanor Blackwood, a reclusive woman who lives on the outskirts of town. Alix discovers she's an old family friend of James's, though she's rarely spoken about. After learning about her, Alix reaches out, hoping for more insight into James's past. But Eleanor's warnings come in cryptic fragments, half-truths, and veiled threats. "You don't know what you've married into," she says, her eyes shadowed with something dark. "Some secrets should remain buried, dear." Cliffhanger ending. With each conversation, the pieces of James's past come together, but they never quite fit. Alix feels like she's walking through a fog, each step forward, only leading her deeper into confusion. She turns over the letter from James's old friend again, rereading it for the 100th time, her heart pounding as she tries to decipher the meaning behind it. Remember who we left behind. A thought suddenly strikes her. Who did James leave behind? As Alix pores over the documents in the attic, a chilling realization sweeps over her. She finds an old photograph she hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath a stack of letters. The photo shows a young James, standing with a woman Alix has never seen before, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth agape in a scream. The background of the photo is a familiar, eerie silhouette, the same trees that surround their cottage. Alix's pulse quickens as she stares at the photograph, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to fall into place. Could the woman in the photo be the key to everything? Just as she's about to make the connection, she hears a noise behind her, a cold breath against the back of her neck. "Looking for something, Alix?" James's voice, low and steady, echoes through the attic. Alix turns to find him standing there, eyes dark, lips curling into a smile that sends a chill down her spine. "You shouldn't have gone digging." The weight of his words hits her like a punch to the gut. The truth is slipping through her fingers, and James knows she's getting closer. The neighbor, Mrs. Edwards. Alix's unease continues to grow, and though she's increasingly distrustful of those closest to her, it's the seemingly harmless neighbor, Mrs. Edwards, who begins to spark her curiosity. Mrs. Edwards is a frail, sweet old woman who lives next door, always seen sitting in her rocking chair, eyes squinting behind thick glasses as she waves at Alix from her front porch. She's the type of person who offers unsolicited advice, makes small talk over the fence, and brings over homemade pies. To Alix, Mrs. Edwards seems innocent enough, a relic of the past, someone who lives quietly in the present. But something about the way she talks, the things she doesn't say, nags at Alix's mind. One evening, when Alix is returning from the town, she sees Mrs. Edwards standing at the gate, her hand trembling as she holds onto the picket fence, as if trying to keep herself steady. "Mrs. Edwards, you all right?" Alix asks, her voice filled with concern. The old woman nods, but her eyes flicker with something Alix can't place. A shadow of recognition. Fear. She glances over her shoulder nervously. "You're married to that Martin boy, aren't you? James. Good man, or so they say." Mrs. Edwards begins, her voice soft and slow, as if choosing her words carefully. "But you know, dear, people like him don't just come out of nowhere. They have histories, things they don't always want people to know." Alix's heart skips a beat. Could this fragile woman know something? Something about James's past that she's holding back? "What are you saying?" Alix asks, trying to remain calm, though her pulse quickens. Mrs. Edwards looks at her, almost apologetically. "Nothing. I'm just a silly old woman who talks too much. Forget I said anything." But before Alix can press further, Mrs. Edwards steps back, slowly turning toward her house, the door creaking shut behind her. Curiosity gnaws at Alix. What was that? Was Mrs. Edwards hinting at something, or was it just the ramblings of an old woman? She spends the next few days thinking back to that conversation, replaying the words in her mind. The next time Alix visits, Mrs. Edwards is sitting outside, knitting quietly. She's completely different now, calm, composed, but there's still something unsettling about the way she watches Alix. Before Alix can say a word, Mrs. Edwards speaks again, her voice low and deliberate. "You should be careful, dear. People like James, sometimes they leave behind more than just memories. They leave secrets." A chill runs down Alix's spine. What is Mrs. Edwards really trying to say? Why does it feel like she knows more than she's letting on? The servant, Henry. Henry, the quiet servant, is another source of suspicion for Alix. He's always in the background, never speaks much, his movements calculated and deliberate. He's been in the household for as long as Alix can remember, but there's something in the way he watches her, an eerie awareness of her every move that unsettles her. One night, Alix wakes to find Henry standing outside her door, staring at her with his cold, emotionless eyes. When she questions him, he simply nods and murmurs something about making sure the house is secure. It's nothing unusual, but it lingers in her mind. As days go by, Alix notices that Henry's demeanor is different. He's always there when she doesn't expect him, standing at the bottom of the stairs when she wakes up, unexpectedly in the kitchen when she goes to make breakfast. Could he know something? His loyalty to James is unquestionable, but Alix can't help but wonder if there's something more. One evening, while exploring the attic, she accidentally overhears a conversation between Henry and James. Her heart races as she strains to listen. "She's getting too close, Henry. She's asking questions I can't answer, James says, his voice strained. I'll handle it, sir, Henry replies, his tone cold and unwavering. Alix freezes. What's going on between James and Henry? What don't they want her to know? That night, she stays awake, watching as Henry moves through the house, the shadows of his figure stretching across the walls. Does he know about James's past, or is he keeping his own secret? The twist. A half-burnt photograph. Alix's obsession with uncovering the truth takes her deeper into the house, into places she never thought to search before. One night, while rifling through some old boxes in the attic, she finds something that makes her blood run cold, a half-burnt photograph of James standing with a woman she doesn't recognize. The edges of the photograph are scorched, the image faded, but there's enough left for Alix to see the woman in the photograph is smiling, but the expression on James's face is different. It's tense, defensive, almost as if he's been caught in a moment of weakness. There's something in his eyes that Alix has never seen before. Fear. She carefully pulls the photograph closer, her fingers trembling. The woman in the photo has dark hair, her features soft but intense. Her eyes are looking directly at the camera, but it's the background that catches Alix's attention. The picture was taken near a familiar place, the trees that surround their cottage. Was this woman once part of their past? Alix's heart races. Why was this photograph half-burnt? Who is this woman? And why is James hiding her from everyone, including her? Just as Alix is about to examine it further, the lights flicker. She hears a sound from downstairs, a soft, almost imperceptible thud. Her pulse quickens. Then she hears a voice from the doorway, low and threatening. You're looking in the wrong places, Alix. James stands in the doorway, his face shadowed in the dim light. His eyes, cold and dark, lock onto hers. The photograph falls from her trembling hand, fluttering to the floor. You shouldn't have found that, he says, stepping into the room. His voice is calm, but there's an underlying menace. The door slams behind him, the tension in the air thickens, and Alix feels the weight of his presence, like a predator closing in on its prey. Cliffhanger ending. Alix takes a step back, her mind racing. What does James know? How far is he willing to go to protect the secrets of his past? As James moves toward her, a dangerous calm settling over him, Alix's heart pounds. Is he the man she married, or is there something darker lurking beneath the surface? The photograph, that woman, it's the key. She knows it. But does she want to uncover the truth, if it means facing the horrifying reality of who James really is? The midpoint. Alix's growing suspicions begin to crystallize into a sense of dread that she can't shake off. She knows something is wrong, but she can't quite place it. Every new clue she uncovers only deepens the mystery. But it's when she's rummaging through a set of old books in their study that everything takes a darker turn. She finds it. A hidden letter, tucked between the pages of a dusty, forgotten novel. It's yellowed with age, its edges frayed as if it's been carefully concealed for years. Alix's fingers tremble as she pulls it free, her heart pounding in her chest. The letter is brief, but its contents are enough to send a cold chill through her veins. The letter is addressed to James Martin, her husband, from someone named Clara. The words are simple but chilling. I can't keep hiding what happened, James. You promised we'd leave it all behind, but the past won't stay buried. She knows too much. I have to disappear before they find me. Her hands shake as she reads the words again, her mind racing. Clara. Who is she? Why is she writing to James? And why is she so terrified? The missing woman. Alix knows the name. The local rumors had whispered about a woman who disappeared years ago, someone no one ever spoke of again. It was a ghost story to most, a legend, but now it's real. James had been involved with Clara before their marriage, and somehow her disappearance is linked to him. But the letter isn't the only thing she finds. As she digs further into the history of their cottage, she uncovers an old brittle journal, its cover cracked and fragile. The pages are yellowed and stained with age, but the entries inside are clear. The cottage has a history of disappearances. The first one happened decades ago, a young woman who vanished without a trace. The second was a man, a former tenant, who left in the middle of the night and was never seen again. And then another woman, another named Clara. The more Alix reads, the more she understands. The cottage, her new home, isn't just a peaceful retreat, it's a place haunted by secrets, a dark history of people disappearing under strange and unexplained circumstances. And James, he's at the center of it all. Her curiosity now borders on obsession. Is James involved in these disappearances? Could he have something to do with Clara's fate? Was she just another victim of a man who knows how to make people vanish without a trace? Determined to confront him, Alix spends the evening preparing herself, every step feeling heavier than the last. She knows that once she walks into that confrontation, there's no turning back. She can feel the weight of her decision pressing on her chest, but she's too far gone now. The answers are right in front of her, and she won't back down. The moment she finally approaches James, the air between them is thick with tension. He's sitting in the study, his face half shadowed by the dim light. Calm, collected. But something is off. "I need to talk to you," Alix says, her voice trembling, but determined. James looks up from his book, his lips curling into a small, almost amused smile. "What's wrong, Alix? Why do you look so unsettled?" Alix takes a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage within her. "I found the letter, the one from Clara." Her voice cracks as she says the name, but she presses on. "I know about the disappearances, and I know that somehow you're involved." For a moment, there's silence. James doesn't move. His eyes, cold and calculating, study her, as if weighing his options. Then, in a split second, everything changes. James's expression shifts, the mask cracks. His charming demeanor fades away, replaced by something darker. His eyes narrow, and his fists clench. His voice drops, turning low and venomous. "You don't know what you're talking about, Alix. You never did. Clara's gone. She made her choice, and I've buried the past for a reason." Alix recoils at the sudden rage in his tone. She's never seen him like this. The man she married, the man she thought she knew, is vanishing before her eyes, replaced by someone she doesn't recognize. Is this who he really is? "I thought you loved me, James," Alix whispers, her voice filled with fear and disbelief. "I thought we were happy." James stands abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor as he rises. "You don't know what it's like to be tied to something like this," he says through clenched teeth. "You don't know what it takes to keep the past buried." Alix stumbles back, her heart racing, as she feels the weight of his words. What is he hiding? His steps are slow but deliberate. As he approaches her, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "You've gone too far, Alix. I warned you. Now, you'll pay the price." Her breath catches in her throat as he reaches for her. The anger in his eyes is raw, primal. Could he really be capable of what she fears? The final act. Alix feels like she's suffocating. The walls of their beautiful, isolated cottage are closing in around her, and every corner she turns feels more oppressive than the last. The oppressive silence of the house is now broken only by the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the sound like a ticking countdown. Every conversation she has with James feels like a trap. Every glance he gives her holds hidden meaning. She can't escape him. She can't escape her fear. Her once serene life has become a prison of paranoia. She feels his eyes on her at all times, when she walks through the house, when she opens the windows, when she breathes. He knows she's getting closer to the truth, and with each passing day, it becomes clearer. James is planning to silence her to keep his secrets buried. Her obsession has reached an unbearable point. Every hidden door she opens leads to another locked one. She goes through old files, photographs, even the letters she had overlooked before, hoping for a clue, a shred of evidence, anything that could expose the darkness he's hiding. But the more she uncovers, the more it feels like the walls are closing in. Then one night, it happens. Alix is pacing the living room, unable to sleep, when she overhears a conversation outside her bedroom door. It's faint, muffled, but it's enough. James is talking to someone. The voice on the other side of the door isn't his, and it's not Henry's, the servant's. It's someone she's never heard before. Panic seizes her chest as she presses her ear to the door. She catches bits and pieces of the conversation words like, "We can't let her know," and "she's too close." Her mind races. Who is he talking to? What are they planning? She needs proof. With shaking hands, she searches the house in a frenzy. Desperation fuels her now. The hidden room, the letter from Clara, the history of the cottageite all seems to be pointing towards something darker than she could have ever imagined. The past is still very much alive, and it's hunting her. In a moment of clarity, something shifts. Mrs. Edwards, the sweet, harmless old neighbor who always seems to know more than she lets on. Alix has been dismissing her for weeks, thinking her presence was just an old woman's harmless curiosity. But no, she realizes that Mrs. Edwards has been watching them too. Watching her. Watching James. The pieces fall into place like a puzzle that was always there, just waiting for her to notice. Mrs. Edwards knows exactly what's been happening in that house, but Alix can't figure out why. She decides to confront the old woman, her heart pounding with anticipation. The tension is unbearable as she walks over to Mrs. Edwards's cottage, the air thick with fear. As Alix knocks on the door, it opens slowly, and there she is, the sweet, harmless old woman, with a knowing smile that sends a shiver down Alix's spine. "You've been asking questions, haven't you?" Mrs. Edwards says, her voice soft, but there's a sharpness behind her words that immediately puts Alix on edge. "I need answers," Alix replies, her voice a mixture of desperation and fury. "You know something about James. I know you do." For a long moment, Mrs. Edwards just looks at her, as if weighing the consequences of revealing the truth, and then, with a deep sigh, she invites Alix inside. The moment the door closes behind her, Alix feels the hairs on the back of her neck rise. The house is filled with an unsettling quiet, and for the first time, Alix feels completely, utterly alone. "You're right," Mrs. Edwards begins, her voice calm but tinged with something dark. "James isn't who he says he is. He's been hiding for years, living under a different name. A name you wouldn't recognize, but one that everyone in this town knows. He was involved in something terrible. A woman's death." Alix's breath catches. "What do you mean? Who is he really?" Mrs. Edwards steps closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "James. He wasn't always James. He was once someone else, a man with a dark past, a man who left behind a trail of lies. The woman he loved, Clara, was murdered, and I know who did it." Alix feels her world tilt. She's on the edge of something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. The twist is deeper than she could have ever expected. Mrs. Edwards continues, her words laced with guilt and fear. "I never meant for it to go this far. But once you've seen too much, there's no going back. James has been hunting people ever since, and he won't stop. He's hiding something in this house, and if he finds out, you know you're next." Alix is frozen. Next. The world she thought she knew is crumbling before her eyes. Mrs. Edwards' face tightens, her hands shaking as she steps back from Alix, as if suddenly realizing the danger she's into. "Don't you see?" Mrs. Edwards whispers. "He's coming for us both." But before Alix can react, the sound of a door creaking open behind her sends her spinning around. It's James. His face is stone cold, his eyes narrowed with rage. The tension in the room shifts in an instant, and Alix can feel her blood run cold. James steps forward, his voice low and menacing. "You shouldn't have come here, Alix. You really shouldn't have come here." Alix's heart skips a beat, her mind racing. She's standing between two forces: James, the man she married, and Mrs. Edwards, the woman who knows the truth. Which one can she trust? And what price will she have to pay to survive? Cliffhanger ending. The lights flicker. The room grows colder. James takes another step forward, his movements deliberate and calculated. Mrs. Edwards backs away, her eyes filled with fear. Alix feels trapped, her body paralyzed by the realization that everything she thought she knew was a lie. Who is the real enemy? Just as James reaches for her, the door bursts open, and a shadowy figure steps inside. Who is it? Is it Henry, or someone else entirely. The truth is more dangerous than she ever could have imagined, and it's coming for her. The climax. The air in the house is thick with tension, as if the very walls are holding their breath. Alix stands in the center of the dimly lit room, her pulse racing, her mind clouded by the revelations she's just uncovered. Mrs. Edwards' words echo in her mind. "You're next." He's been planning this for years. She knows now, with terrifying certainty, that James is not who she thought he was. The man she married, the charming, distant man she once adored, is a stranger to her now, someone whose lies are darker than the night itself. The walls have been closing in on her from the very start. This house, this cottage where she thought she could find peace, has become her prison, her psychological prison. Alix's fingers tremble as she clutches the letter she found earlier that revealed James's darkest secret, and slowly, but with mounting dread, she puts the pieces together. She never imagined it would come to this. She steps cautiously into the living room, and there he is. James stands by the fireplace, his back turned to her, as though he's waiting for her to make her move. His posture is unnerving in its stillness. Alix's voice cracks, but she forces it steady. "What have you done, James?" He doesn't turn around. Instead, his voice cuts through the silence like a knife. "You always ask the wrong questions, Alix." The coldness in his tone sends a shiver down her spine, but she pushes forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This is it. This is the confrontation she's been dreading. But she has no choice. She has to confront him, to face the truth, no matter how monstrous it might be. "Why, James?" she demands, each word heavier than the last. "Why did you marry me? Was it just to make me disappear when you were done with me? Was I just another part of your game?" He turns then, slowly, his expression chillingly composed, as if he's been expecting this moment for a long time. His lips curl into a faint, almost amused smile. "You think you're the one who's been playing the game?" he asks, his voice low, almost affectionate. "Alix, my dear, you were never in control. I am the one who pulls the strings." Her stomach drops. It all comes crashing down. The affair, the missing woman, the lies. It wasn't just a matter of an affair or a murder. It was all carefully orchestrated. James wasn't just hiding something, was building a trap for her. A trap that went far beyond her suspicions. He had planned it from the very beginning. She suddenly realizes the horrific truth. "You weren't just hiding an affair. You were going to frame me, weren't you?" His eyes flash with cold, calculating malice. "Oh, you're starting to understand now. Yes, Alix, I was going to stage your death. Make it look like you were the one responsible for everything. Your body would have been found in that cottage, and they'd blame someone else. A perfect crime." Her breath hitches. She's been the target of a twisted psychological game. The house, the isolation, the tension, it was all part of his plan to break her, to control her, to make her feel trapped until there was no way out. But the nightmare doesn't end there. The worst part, she was never meant to escape. James takes a step closer to her, his gaze never leaving hers. "You see, Alix, the house isn't just a physical trap, it's a psychological one. Everything here was designed to manipulate you. Every moment, every breath you took, was orchestrated to break you down, piece by piece." Alix recoils as the realization sinks in. The truth hits her like a punch to the gut. James wasn't just her husband, he was her tormentor. The facade of love, the charming man she married, had all been a mascone that was now falling away to reveal the monster beneath. She feels the weight of the moment crushing her chest, but there's something else, a glimmer of resolve. She's not going down without a fight. She can't. "James," she says, her voice trembling but defiant, "I won't let you get away with this." But as she takes a step back, ready to make her escape, a door slams shut. Her eyes dart toward the source of the sound. It's Henry, the servant. He's blocking the only exit. His face is eerily calm, but his eyes are filled with an unmistakable warning. "You're not leaving, Alix," James says coldly, taking a step forward. "Not until we finish this." The room spins as Alix realizes the horror of her situation. She's caught trapped between James, the man who wants to destroy her, and Henry, who has always been in on the plan. There's no escape. She is trapped in a house that was designed to break her, with nowhere to turn. Alix's mind races, looking for a way out. She thinks of the letter, the diary, the clues that she's gathered. But it's too late. As she looks around, the walls seem to close in on her. The house is not just a dream honeymoon turned into a labyrinth of fear. This is the story of Alix Martin and the chilling secrets she uncovered at Philomel Cottage.